Yes, so the challenges phase starts with an action window again, and this is my chance to do stuff, including putting some of these characters into play for my leftover gold. I will show you how to do that, but let's just first discuss what the challenges phase is. So there are three challenge types that exist in this game, as you can see by these challenge icons. And as the active player, again this is the same concept as in the marching phase. As the first player, I am the active player. I can do by default one challenge of each type. So I can do a military, an intrigue, and the power challenge. And then when I'm done, my opponent will become the active player and he can do the same. However, so this is where Casterly Rock is useful. It has a constant ability. It says you may initiate an additional intrigue challenge during the challenges phase. So this refers to me. I control Casterly Rock, and that means I can initiate 2 intrigue challenges and 1 military and 1 power challenge, while Hannes can initiate only 1 of each. And these challenges are optional. I can do all 3, I can do only 1 if I want, I can do none at all, I can simply just pass. And the point of doing these challenges is to apply claim. So this is where, pardon me, this is where this number 1 on my plot card becomes important. This is the claim value, and if you check all the plots here, all of them have all of my plots have claim 1, and the vast majority of plots in the game have this value of 1, and occasionally you will find plots with a higher number, or very occasionally plots that have 0, and then some card abilities will modify this value, possibly raise it, and we'll see how that benefits you potentially in the challenges phase. Okay, so the action window is my chance to put to trigger an ability, including putting cards into play with this ambush keyword. As you can see on the Hound, he has ambush 4, and what this means is in the challenges phase action window, I can pay 4 gold from my gold pool. As you can see, I have 5 left to put the Hound into play. And this is not the same as marshalling the Hound, in case there is a card ability that refers to that. For instance, a reaction after a card is marshaled, you will not be able to use that if you put the Hound into play by his ambush ability. So let's do this now. As you can see, I can, if I drag the Hound into play, this will not work correctly. We'll get the red warning again that I've done something weird. So if I just click on the Hound, it will ambush him into play by 4, and that was my action.
I passed my action, so it's Mia's turn again.
Okay, and then I can do something else if I want to, but let's say I pass, and then we get to this screen here. So now I have the option of the action window has closed, so I have the option to initiate a challenge. I can choose any order, I can click done, and that will pass the opportunity to Hannes to initiate his challenges, or I can do my challenges now. So what do these mean? So when you initiate a military challenge, let's do that to show you. So the game is asking me to declare attackers, or to select challenge attackers, and as you can see, Tyrion is not an option here. It offers me Tywin and it offers me the Hound because these two have the military icon. So in order for a character to be declared as an attacker, it needs to have the corresponding challenge icon, and it needs to be standing, because to declare the character as an attacker, I will need to kneel it. And well, the other part of the process of initiating a challenge, I guess choosing the opponent, is redundant here, because there is only one. You will see this a few times, maybe in some card text. Something will say choose an opponent, or each player does something. So that just means both players in a game where there are only two, and choosing the opponent is redundant because there will only be one, but that specific wording will matter if you play with more than two players. Okay, so as you can see, my opponent doesn't have any characters with the keyword, with the military icon. And it's the same to defend the challenge. You will need to have the corresponding icon and a standing character, so my opponent will not be able to defend this challenge successfully. So I can select only the Hound, for instance, in this challenge. If I click on Tywin, as you can see, they're both selected, so they will both be knelt and participate in this challenge, but since I will win with just the Hound, there is no reason to commit Tywin to this challenge as well. So if I click done, as you can see, the Hound is knelt and he is now participating, and in the chat log it says that I have initiated a military challenge with strength 6. As you can see, this is where that number is important, so the Hound has 6 strength, and now the action window opens after attackers are declared. If I had something now, I could use that, but I don't, so I will pass. And now when my opponent passes, he will be prompted with the same options to declare defenders.
I don't now can do anything about his attack, but for example, I have this location, Gates of Winterfell, and it has a challenges action. So it's something that I can only trigger during the challenges phase. And I can trigger it basically anytime I have an action window, even during a challenge like now. So I can trigger it now, and I reveal the top of my deck, the card, and I would be looking at it. And if it's a star card, I'm allowed to draw it. So
yeah, so the prompt I got now is if I have any interrupts to that. As you can see, there the timer, I've clicked I need more time, and that stops the timer and gives me the other two options. So I can pass, or I can use this card that was highlighted here. So Treachery is an event that I can play from my hand. It costs me 1, and as you can see, I have 1 in my gold pool. And so it says play only if you have if you control a unique Lannister character. This is a play restriction, so I have 3 unique Lannister characters, so no problem here. And it says interrupt. When the effects of a triggered character location or attachment ability would initiate, cancel those effects. So as you can see, Gates of Winterfell has triggered, and it would like to reveal that top card of Hannes's deck. And I can cancel this. And the cost of that ability, as you can see, it says nil Gates of Winterfell will still be paid if I cancel it. So Hannes will not be able to restand it and trigger it again, but the effects will be cancelled. And well, Hannes has an option here as well if I use this Treachery. So let's just show you. I have paid 1 to play Treachery, and now Hannes is prompted to use Bran Stark, right?
that is right. I have the prompt because it says when the effect of an opponent's event would initiate, that is Treachery. Sacrifice Bran Stark to cancel those effects. So I would have to put him in the discard pile. I only have a few characters on board, and somebody will be killed. So I won't do that now. So I'll pass on that. I don't have to trigger this. So yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed that he cancelled my Gates of Winterfell, but yeah, I will accept that for now.
Yeah, so as you can see, the cancel was successful, the gates is knelt, and nothing happened with the Gates of Winterfell. So this is just to show you what cancels look like, but from a strategic point, this is not a good use, for instance, of my... This is a very valuable card, Treachery, and there are worse things that will happen to me that I would desperately need to cancel. So probably not a great play, but just to show you. So this effect now did not happen, but we'll show you, I'm sure, in the next round what it looks like. So we are still in the military challenge, and after attackers are declared, so I passed my action, but Hannes did have an action. So I now have, even though I previously pressed, I have an opportunity again, and since I still have nothing, I can pass this one too.
This time pass as well. So basically, now I have to choose a defender. I don't have any character with a military icon, so I cannot choose any offender, so I leave the challenge unopposed. And it says, Feuerbird does not defend the challenge.
Yes, so we are back in another action window after defenders are declared. It's the same thing. So if we both pass here, the challenge will then resolve. I will be determined as the winner of the challenge. So if you want to influence the challenge in any way, this is the last opportunity you have to do that. And if you cannot, the challenge will then resolve. So I can click pass, and then
I get another challenge window. I won't do anything either. And now the Hound triggers. He has a forced reaction. And upon his forced reaction, I could use my Begging Brother with his interrupt, because there's a character ability. But as it could be considered something negative, I don't want to cancel it. I might be helping in the half. So
yeah.
I'm not using the Begging Brother.
Okay, so I'm now prompted to resolve this forced reaction on the Hound. So as you can see, I won the military challenge. It's 6 versus 0, and this is, I guess, a good opportunity to talk about this exact sequence of what happens during the challenge. So you will often come across, I think it's in the FAQ as well at the bottom, or maybe in the rules. So this acronym DUCK, D-U-C-K, that describes the sequence of resolving the challenge. So D stands for determined winner, and as you can see, it says here that I won 6-0, and this is now basically set in stone. This will not change even if characters that participate in this challenge are somehow removed, or something happens that alters the strength of characters. This is already determined. So the reactions to winning the challenge happen in this step, and as you can see, the Hound is a forced reaction, so the forced reactions always need to be triggered before normal optional reactions. And let's see what the Hound says. So after you win a challenge in which the Hound is participating, so this first part of the text is something we call triggering condition. So in the rules, the entry for triggering condition is very long and complicated, so I guess maybe at the end of the game we can have a detailed look at that, but for now we'll just simplify it. So basically, winning the challenge is the triggering condition for the Hound, and his forced reaction reacts to that. And then it says you may discard one card at random from your hand. If you do not, return the Hound to your hand. So the game now prompts me, do I want to discard a random card? So one of these will be discarded and the Hound will remain in play. Or if I choose no, the Hound will return to my hand. So forced reaction basically implies that something bad for me is happening, but and I guess we're going into strategy a little bit here. You will probably, once you play a few games, see that cards like the Hound that remove themselves from the board and go back to your hand, this is something that often is beneficial to you, and you might not want to cancel abilities such as that. So if I click no, the Hound will return to my hand, and then if there are other reactions to winning the challenge, they can be triggered, but since neither of us has any, the game proceeds to the next step. So in the duck
Maybe
sequence,
one thing we can inject here, Mia, is that, for example, Caitlin's ability says your opponents cannot trigger card abilities. So if you had done a power challenge, and I would have had Caitlin in the challenge, then the Hound would still have triggered, because forced reactions are not triggered by an opponent, but are considered to be triggered by the game itself, right?
yes, exactly. So Caitlin will not stop forced reactions from resolving, but she will stop anything optional that I might have, and we'll see that I'm sure when Caitlin participates, because I do have some abilities that I would like to trigger. So the next step in the duck sequence, the U stands for unopposed. As you can see, I've gained 1 power from an unopposed challenge. So what does this mean? Since there were no defenders and the strength of the losing player was 0, the challenge is considered to be unopposed. So in order to win the challenge in the first place, I need to have a value higher than 0 myself, which will almost always be the case, since if I can initiate a challenge, I will by default have some character with some kind of strength. Usually, I guess there are exceptions if you can think of an extreme scenario where that wouldn't be the case, but normally it is. And if my opponent, for instance, defended with a character with strength 6, it would be 6 versus 6, and the tie in that case is broken in my favor, in favor of the attacking player. So I would win the challenge. And in that case, the challenge would not be unopposed, because my opponent had a value higher than 0. But in this case, I gain 1 additional power for an unopposed challenge, and as you can see, the power goes on my faction card. And this is the first power anyone has gained. As you can see, the counter here, this is it's 1, so this takes into account all the power I have on cards under my control, and the faction card is where most of the power you gain will usually be stored, but it could be on some characters or other cards in play as well. And so one thing we haven't talked about is the actual goal of the game is, of course, getting to 15 power, and winning an unopposed challenge is one way to get power that gets you towards that goal. So in this first round, where the result is basically it's 1 against 0, so very small numbers, you might not worry about unopposed power that much, but sometimes if you leave too many challenges unopposed over the course of the game, you will feel the consequences for sure. So again, actually this is a great example. So the Count has left play by his forced reaction, so I don't actually have any participating characters anymore, but since I won here at the D step of this sequence, 6 versus 0, this is set in stone, so the challenge will resolve, and at the same time when this was determined, it was also determined that the challenge was unopposed, so even though the Hound is gone, it will still continue to resolve, and I still gain that unopposed power. And then I get to the next step, which is C, that means claim. So the game asks me to apply claim. This is mandatory. The site allows you to click continue and skip this step just in case you want to do something manually to correct the game state in some way, but usually you should just click apply claim, obviously. And what happens is, so different challenges have different ways of resolving claim. And if I win a military challenge, that means that my opponent will now need to kill a character. So let's apply claim and see what happens.
So I now get the choice of the 3 characters I have, and I choose poor Bran, who will be put from the board into the dead pile.
Yeah, so the dead pile is an area where characters find themselves when they are killed. So it's distinct from the discard pile. And what this means is now that Bran is in the dead pile, if my opponent draws another copy of Bran, he now cannot marshal or by a card ability put into play Bran again, because he is already dead. So as you can see, we are playing with different decks here, with different factions, but it is possible obviously to play Lannister against Lannister, and then both players would have might have the same characters, both players might have Tywin, so you can have your own Tywin and the opponent can have their own Tywin on the board. It doesn't conflict. And if, for instance, I was playing Stark and my opponent's Bran was dead, that doesn't really affect my Bran. I could still play my Bran just fine. Okay, so killing off characters by military claim obviously helps with the board state. It helps with the other challenges because now my opponent has fewer options to defend the other 2 challenges. And there are decks that specialize in this playstyle that basically play very aggressively and try to kill off as many characters on the opponent's side as possible, and then stuff like unopposed power and that kind of thing builds up really quickly because the opponent doesn't have anything on the board to oppose you. So that is one possible way to play. So the K in the duck sequence stands for keywords. So now this if you disable this setting, which after a few games you might probably do, this will just be resolved automatically, but here we can select the order of the keywords, and this is as you can see, none of these keywords, Insight, Intimidate, Pillage or Renown, these are called challenge resolution keywords. They would resolve at this step, so none of them were present in this challenge. The Hound doesn't have any of these keywords, so nothing will happen. I can just click automatic and the game will do nothing instead of just clicking on each one individually. And now the challenge is over. The challenge has resolved and we are back where we started at the beginning of the challenges phase, in that action window. So we now have an opportunity to do something if we want to, and then if I pass again and my opponent passes, I will have another opportunity to initiate a challenge. So the second challenge type I can do is the Intrigue challenge. So this follows all the same rules, except I can the claim is different, so the reward for me will be different and the penalty for my opponent will be different. So again, I can choose both of these characters because both have an Intrigue icon, and let's choose Tyrion. So as you can see, Tyrion has the stealth keyword, and what does this do? So when a character with stealth is declared as the attacker, he can choose one character on the opponent's side. In this case, I can choose either Caitlyn or the Begging Brother, and I can bypass that character with stealth. And when we get to the point where the opponent has to declare defenders, the character that was bypassed by stealth cannot be declared as a defender for that challenge. So for instance, if I declared Tyrion without stealth now, I would have 4 strength in the challenge, but my opponent could defend with 4 and 3, so with 2 characters for a combined strength of 7, and I would not win that challenge. But if, for instance, Tyrion bypasses Caitlyn here, Caitlyn will not be able to defend this challenge, and Tyrion will be too strong for the Begging Brother. So I can click done. This is optional. I can choose not to bypass anyone, but usually you might want to do that. So if there was a character, for instance Bran, still on the board, even though he doesn't have an Intrigue icon, I can bypass him too, but this is usually not a good idea because he cannot normally defend anyway. He would need some other card effect that would allow him to defend an Intrigue challenge without the corresponding icon. So let me bypass Caitlyn here, and now it's asking me if I have any reactions to a challenge being initiated, and I do. So Tyrion says reaction after an Intrigue challenge is initiated, gain 2 gold, limit twice per round. So as you can see, I'm now down to 0 gold in my gold pool, and I can use Tyrion to get back to 2, and then, for instance, if I had 4 gold in my gold pool, I could ambush the Hound again, or I could pay for other potential cards that I had in my hand, for instance events like Treachery, or different cards with ambush like this Queen's Assassin that also costs me 4 gold. So when it says gain 2 gold, that means you take 2 gold from the treasury and add it to your gold pool, and when you pay gold, like I did earlier with Treachery, you take that gold from your gold pool and put it back to the treasury. So if I click on Tyrion, he will now attempt to gain those 2 gold, but again, we have Begging Brother.
Has an interrupt. So now I know that he might try to accumulate more gold to get the Hound back in. So I don't want Miha to gain the 2 gold. So I trigger the interrupt of the Begging Brother. I'll remove 1 gold from the Begging Brother. And the reaction of Miha does not cancel, and he does not get the gold.
As you can see, it limits twice per round on Tyrion. So that means I can initiate an additional Intrigue challenge because I have casted the Rock. And if I triggered Tyrion again, for instance, that would be my second attempt this round. And then if Hannes initiated an Intrigue challenge when it was his turn, this would be the third trigger, and since Tyrion has a limit twice per round, he could then not react for the third time. And even though he was cancelled this time by the Begging Brother, that attempt to trigger still counts towards the limit for Tyrion. So limits and maxima, this is a rules entry that you might want to read. These are quite important. So limits will be on cards in play, usually on characters and locations. So the only one we have now is, I think, is Tyrion, and these are if Tyrion now leaves play somehow and re-enters, the limit is reset because the game considers the Tyrion that enters play a new instance of the card, so he would be able to trigger his reaction twice again. And a max it works slightly differently, but I guess I'll show you that when a card with a max gets played. And the third entry that is mentioned is something like, I think, Sandstead, where it says limit 1 copy per character. So this will be on attachments. That then means that only 1 Sandstead can be attached to a particular character. We will discuss how attachments work next round. As you can see, I have a couple here in my hand that I will attempt to marshal next round. Okay, so we are now in the action window after attackers are declared, so I've initiated a strength 4 intrigue challenge, and I can see if my opponent will defend this one.
Yes, cannot choose Caitlyn now. I can only choose the begging brother, and I will choose him to defend. So I kneel him, and he enters a challenge with strength 3.
Okay, so 4 on the attacking player side and 3 on the defending player side. It is possible to manipulate this number with card abilities now in these action windows, but I don't think that will happen. So Stark is a faction. I'm sure if you play it, you will soon see that plays very, I guess you could say very honestly. It has all the cards that do something are on the board. They won't have many tricks in hand, and they're not very good at changing the strength of characters once they are already in the challenge, whereas Lannister and some other factions do like to play cards from their hand during the challenges phase.
So I don't have any action more. I have to, yeah, I will lose this challenge, but there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, so again, we start with reactions to winning the challenge, which don't exist in this particular instance. So as you can see, 4-3. So the number that matters here is obviously that it's greater than 0, which will stop the unopposed power. But apart from that, if it's something like 18-1 or if it's 4-3, it often will not make any difference. The only thing that matters is whether the challenge is unopposed or not. But there could be some cards that reference this difference in the strength by which the challenge was won. Winning by 5 is often something that appears on card abilities, and I think my opponent will have over the course of this game possibly a card or two that refer to winning a challenge by 5 strength. As you can see, we've already skipped to the claim part of the challenge. We didn't get any power for unopposed this time, and I can apply claim. So the intrigue challenge means that when I win it, my opponent has to discard 1 card from their hand at random. So I say 1 card, and we saw 1 character being killed previously, so this is the claim number here. The claim value on my plot is 1, which means 1 character killed for a military claim and 1 card discarded for intrigue claim. So this is where this number is important. If you have a claim larger than 1, for instance, when I did the military challenge, if I had claim 2, it would be very damaging for my opponent. But as you will see, plots that have a higher claim value will often have a worse gold value to compensate, or they will have some sort of detrimental ability that will hinder you if you want to have an increased claim value. And yeah, on the other hand, if you have a plot card with a very high gold value, usually there won't be anything as that plot does. And noble cost, for instance, is 5, but effectively it's 7 because it also reduces the cost of 1 character by 2. So it provides you 7 gold worth of 7 worth of gold, I guess. And it has no other ability apart from that. And there are some plots that have an even higher number, 9 or 10, and these plots will have some kind of detrimental ability that actually hurts you because it gives you so much gold. So if I click apply claim, now 1 card at random will be discarded from my hand. As you can see, Hannes had 6 in hand and now he has 5, and this direwolf pup was discarded. And yeah, so there is some variance here obviously in every game, because this is a random trigger. It can discard something really good, or it can discard something that is not very important, like this direwolf pup. But yeah, this part of the game is in your hands. So if you do a lot of intrigue challenges, you will get rid of some of these resources that my opponent has available. And on the other hand, if I can defend against intrigue, I will keep all of the cards I have. So this is basically an investment for the future. If the game takes some time, you will then have more cards to play out of your hand than your opponent, and you will also be able to eventually dominate the board state with this. So again, we have this prompt to choose the keywords, but we don't have any of these keywords available. So we will pass that, and we are back to the action window. And now, as you can see, the military is no longer available because I've initiated my one military challenge, and it would be the same for intrigue if I didn't have this Casterly Rock, which allows me an additional intrigue challenge. And I only have one standing character. I have Tywin, and I won't be able to do all the challenges that are allowed here because I'm out of characters. So I will need to choose whether to do another intrigue or power, or simply pass and use Tywin to defend instead. So power challenge is the reward for winning a power challenge is to gain power, basically. So when you win a power challenge, when you apply claim, you move one power or whatever the claim value is from the opponent's faction card to your faction card. And in the early game, as you can see, Hannes doesn't have any power. So if I did a power challenge and won, the claim would not do anything. So this is not something I'm looking to do at the very start of the game. But since getting to 15 power is the goal of the game, this will become increasingly more important over the course of the game. So instead, I would like to do another intrigue challenge to get rid of some more of his resources here in hand. And again, I can use Tyrion and
this time I choose not to cancel it, but because I just don't want him to get to 4 gold overall, to jump in the Hound again. So here you can see I get 2 gold from Tyrion's reaction.
Yeah, so 2 gold. If you know basically the opponent's cards a little bit, and you will get to know the cards, you will know what the gold can be spent for. So 4 for the Hound is very common in Lannister decks, but 2, they might have characters that can be put into play for 2 as well, but obviously are not as great as the Hound is. So 1 cancel is very sensible here to keep the gold at 2. However, as you can see, Tywin's constant ability says Tywin Lannister gets +1 strength, so when it says STR, it's short for strength. So he gets +1 strength for each gold in your gold pool. So I now have 2 gold in my gold pool, so when I initiated the challenge, he was he had 6 strength before, but now with Tyrion's reaction, I get 2 gold in my gold pool, and Tywin's strength goes up to 8. But in either case, he was stronger than Caitlyn.
Now I could defend, but I choose not to defend, and I leave this challenge unopposed.
Yeah, so Caitlyn, when she is participating in a challenge, your opponents cannot trigger card abilities. So that means something like Tyrion or Begging Brother is a card ability that you might want to trigger during a challenge. However, Tywin's ability is constant, so it's not a triggered ability, and if Caitlyn participated, it would not stop Tywin's strength boost here. He would not drop down to 6, he would remain at 8 strength.
It would also not hinder any challenge resolution keywords like renown, for example. So that would happen if I had a challenge or not.
Yes, and so this is the first time we get the opportunity to resolve a keyword. As you can see, Tywin has the renowned keyword. And what this means is, when you win a challenge in which a character with renown is participating, that character gains 1 power. And this power is put directly on Tywin. As you can see, I have 2 on my faction card and 1 on Tywin, and my power counter says 3. And the rest don't exist, so I can skip them. And one of the ways to win the game quickly is, of course, to have a lot of characters that can gain power in a similar way with a renowned keyword or by some kind of triggered ability that they have. And now I could initiate a power challenge. However, I don't have any characters left, so let's just see what happens if I click on the power challenge. It will prompt me to select attackers, but I don't have any attackers, so nope, it says that the power challenge is cancelled and it goes back to the action window. So this is not something you can actually legally do in the game, but sometimes if you overlook something and you click on power by mistake, you will get back to it will loop back to this same place. So I can click done, and that finishes my challenges, and now my opponent becomes the active player, and we are back to this action window before the challenge is initiated. And when I click pass and my opponent clicks pass, he will get the same opportunity.
Exactly, to do a Intrigue challenge with Caitlin before.
Okay, so Caitlin is now participating. So I've used Tyrion twice, but if I didn't use Tyrion, if I still had one possible trigger here, I now could not trigger this because Caitlin is participating in a challenge. So as soon as a character is declared either as an attacker or a defender, it is considered to be participating in that particular challenge, and that stops Tyrion being able to react. So as you can see, I cannot defend this one successfully or defend at all, and I cannot declare any defenders. And now I get
unopposed power, and then I can apply claim and randomly discard 1 card from Mia's hand.
Yeah, so it's prompting me to interrupt claim being applied, so very rarely you will come across. I'm hoping actually that we might be able to show you something that interrupts claim being applied in this game, but there isn't anything in hand at the moment, so I can click pass and claim be applied, or I can even click pass, click don't ask until end of round, so I won't be getting this interrupt anymore, but in this case it won't matter because this will be the last challenge. So it's asking me to choose the order of keywords again, even though my opponent is the active player, so the first player, as you can see here, I'm still the first player. The first player chooses the order of keywords, and again, there aren't any keywords. So one thing I should mention, when Tywin gained power for Renown earlier, so Renown works on defense as well, so if Tywin defended successfully, he would get Renown as well. And some keywords don't work on defense, we'll get to those. And now we are in the action window again, so this is the action window before the next challenge is initiated, and you will always have this last opportunity to do something, even though we can see that all characters are knelt and then that nothing else will be initiated. You still have an option to do something. For instance, if I had 4 gold, I would be able to ambush the Hound again in this action window, and if I click pass and my opponent clicks pass, the action window will close. So you need to be careful, because for instance, if there were characters standing and I really wanted to ambush the Hound, but I wanted to wait, and my opponent now passed his challenges, this window would close and the phase would end. So sometimes those mind games will be in effect, and you need to be careful that you don't pass too soon before you do everything you need to do.
Exactly. Now all my characters are null, so I can't really initiate a challenge. But I have an action window, and I'll use the Northern Armory to stand a Stark character. And this would then be a Caitlin Stark again, because I want to do a power challenge to get at one of Miha's juicy power on his faction card. So I initiate a power challenge with Caitlin. So you can basically use a character in several challenges. Basically, there's no limit as long as you're legally allowed to include the character. You can initiate several challenges, both on attack, but also include them on defense several times if you have the ability to stand them again, or if they don't kneel for particular card abilities challenge. So this is also unopposed. I get a power of unopposed, and then I apply claim, and Miha gets one power less on his faction card, and I get one power more online.
Again, we'll skip the keyword. So after all of this, as you can see, Hannes has 3 and I have 2 power in total, and all of his power is on the faction card, but I have 1 on the faction card and 1 on Tywin. So when it was my chance to do the power challenge, I couldn't steal anything from the faction card, but Hannes now has the power I gained for unopposed to steal when it was his turn for the power challenge. So he comes out ahead on power. And we are back to this action window, and this time we will pass it, and the challenges phase will end. And now we come to the dominance phase. So if you have any characters that are still standing, or if you have any leftover gold, this does not go to waste. As you can see, I win dominance 2 versus 0. So what does this mean exactly? Dominance, what happens is you count the strength of all of your standing characters. So for instance, if Tyrion was standing, he would count as 4 towards my dominance total, and also all the gold that is left in your gold pool by this point. So I have 2 gold, and Hannes has 0 gold and no standing characters, so I win dominance 2 versus 0. And the player who wins dominance also gains 1 power for their faction. So when a player wins power or gains power for their faction, it means the power goes on the faction card. And I am now up to 3 power in total as well. And yeah, so this is something that you need to keep an eye on throughout the challenges phase to see what the situation is like for dominance. Sometimes you might not bother thinking too much about it because it's just 1 power, but sometimes it could be important, and some factions, for instance Baratheon, specializes in this power gain in the dominance phase and has some triggers as well that can gain additional power or do something useful and beneficial when you win dominance. And then we come to the action window in the dominance phase. So this one is usually there won't be much to do here, but there could be, so check if you have anything here. And if you have any cards left standing that can do something useful, this is the last time they can be used, because in the next phase everything will stand. So if you have something that kneels in order to trigger its effect, you can use it here and it will then immediately stand when we get to the next phase, but there is nothing on the board like that at the moment. So again, we both need to pass the action window, and we come to the standing phase, and this is where all the cards in play simultaneously stand. As you can see, all my characters stand, and all the locations stand except for Northern Armory, because it says Northern Armory cannot stand. So the word cannot is important as well. It's the rules entry specifically says that the word cannot is absolute and cannot be countermanded by other abilities. So for instance, if Hannes had an ability that says stand the location, he could not use it on the Northern Armory because the Northern Armory cannot stand. And the faction cards sometimes can be knelt as well, and if they were knelt, they would be standing here as well. As you can see, we both play this agenda that we haven't talked about yet, so it has an action ability that says kneel your faction card to reduce the cost of the next loyal card you marshal or play this phase by 1. So if we use that, this is the point where the faction card would stand as well.
Maybe just to emphasize this point, this also helped me to understand that this cannot is really absolute, and there are many exceptions to many other rules, but there's no exception to cannot, no, never, ever. So cannot is really, really always absolute. This is really important to remember that.
Yeah, so Northern Armory is, as you can see, it was very useful in the previous in the challenges phase. So if this could stand, it could be used the same way next round. So that's why this restriction is here. That basically it's a one-time use, and if you want to reuse it, it needs to basically you need to get it off the board in some way and then replay it so that it enters play standing again. So all cards that enter play by default enter play standing, and then they can be knelt in the challenges phase or by some card abilities.
But it's not completely useless, so because even though it's kneeling, this +1 gold still applies, so that remains in effect.
Yeah, so yeah, this is actually a good point. Often new players ask whether cards that are knelt still provide these passive bonuses like the gold modifier. Yes, so it doesn't matter if the card is standing or knelt. As we saw even with Tyrion in this round, he could still gain the gold even though he himself was knelt. So it doesn't matter for his reaction. If card needs to be standing to trigger, it will say so. It will say something like, while Tyrion is standing, you can gain gold or something like that. But by default, it doesn't matter whether the card is standing or not in order to trigger its ability. So the standing phase has the same action window. After all the cards stand, we have opportunity to take actions, and so as you can see, I have 2 gold in my gold pool. In the next phase I will lose this gold, so if I have something to spend it on, this is my last chance. Otherwise it will go to waste, and with Tyrion gaining gold in the challenges phase, this will often be the case for Lannister, that you might end up with gold that you cannot spend in any way. And when we pass this one, we will come to the taxation phase. So what happens here? First of all, we return all the gold back to the treasury, so we are back to 0, and the next phase will be that plot phase again, where we started the round, and as you can see, we are back to having no gold in that phase. So if you can gain gold somehow in this phase, this could potentially be useful, because there are some tricks that you can do in the plot phase only you have gold, and there are very few options to gain gold in that phase, either in the plot phase or in this taxation phase that precedes the plot phase. And the other thing that happens is reserve is checked. As you can see, it says that we are already below the reserve value. So reserve value is this 6 in the bottom right corner on the plot. And what this means is that when reserve is checked in this taxation phase, if you have more cards in hand, for instance, if Hannes had 7 cards in hand, he would need to choose and discard 1 card from his hand to go down to 6, which is his reserve value. So this is the number of cards he can take into the next round. And yeah, you cannot choose just to discard cards if you are not over the reserve value. So This is not something you can legally choose to do in case there would be some benefit to doing that. You have to be over reserved to discard them. And you will often see plots that have a fairly small number but a very strong ability. For instance, I have a plot that has, well, all my plots actually have at least 6, but some plots with a very strong ability might have 4, for instance, and then by not spending, not using these cards, I would be wasting one because I would have to discard it. And yeah, you can have some extreme numbers. There is a plot that has 0, for instance, reserve value, so it has a strong ability, but then when you get to the taxation phase, all of your cards are gone, and if you haven't done a lot of damage on the board, for instance, or gained a lot of power, you will then possibly find yourself in trouble after having to discard your hand. Okay, so this is the last action window of the round. When I pass this one, we will get to round 2. As you can see, we are back in the plot phase. It says round 2, and we are prompted to select plots again. So I'm still actually the first player until we compare those initiative values again and the new first player is selected. Even though this is the end of the round, the first player stays first player until new plots are revealed. So what happens now is when we reveal the new plots, the previous plot will no longer have an effect on the game. It will enter your used plot pile. So we will place the new plot on top of this plot, and this ability to reduce the cost of the first lord or lady character will no longer be active. And as you can see, I cannot choose to reveal noble cause again. I have to reveal one of the other 6, and then when I reveal it, when we get to the following round, I will have to choose one of the remaining 5, and so on until we get to the last one. So we'll see what happens when we get to the last one. We're taking this quite slowly, but obviously when we explain most of the concepts, we will start to play a little quicker and show you how the game might progress. Okay, so let's see what we can do with the plots. What shall we choose? Let's choose this one. Okay, so this time my opponent reveals a plot with initiative value 2, and he has the King's Road, which adds 1, so he has 3. And I have 2 on my Game of Thrones, so my opponent wins initiative and selects me to be first player.
Exactly, and maybe we'll see why I chose that. So it's not always an advantage to go first, and it's not always a disadvantage. It really depends.
Okay, so now it's asking me if I have interrupts to trading with the Pentoshi. So this plot says when revealed. Okay, so we've reached this that I wanted to explain. So when revealed abilities on the plots are now resolved after that first player is chosen. So if my plot had a when revealed ability, I would choose the order. Both would need to be resolved. They are not mandatory, and I would choose the order. Sometimes it's quite important, the order in which plots the when revealed abilities are resolved, because they have some interaction with each other, but often it will not matter that much. And it says each opponent gains 3 gold and cannot be cancelled, as we said in that when we talked about cannot previously. This is absolute, so there is no way for me to... It's asking me if I have any interrupts, but since it cannot be cancelled, I cannot possibly have any interrupts to this. So each opponent gains 3 gold. Each opponent means only me, because I'm the only opponent, and I now have some plot in the plot phase already. So if I, for instance, had something to use that plot, that gold on, I could now do it in this action window, And since my opponent doesn't have gold, it would be more difficult for him, for instance, to do something to stop me in this particular phase. But I have nothing.
Another, and then we draw cards.
Okay, we draw on Gold Mine and a Lannisport Merchant, two useful cards that we will marshal quite soon. Okay, so as you can see, I now have 9 gold. I had 3 previously from this trading with the Pentoshi plot. Then I collected 4 for Game of Thrones and also 2 for the modifier on timing. And I have nothing else, no economy locations like this Northern Armory, and this is not a great situation, so I've drawn one here and I shall marshal it. So it costs 2 and I pay 2 to marshal it. And as you can see, the locations are in the back row here, and in the front row are the characters. So if you play in person, obviously these cards will be facing the other way so that the opponent has them in front of him. But in this case, it's all displayed in this way so that I can read it. And for my opponent will see it from the other side. So if we saw his screen now, there would be his hand at the bottom here and his faction card, and I would be on top, and my characters would be also facing him so that he could read them. Okay, so Gold Mine has that gold modifier that will help me in future rounds, and it also has an action. So it says kneel Gold Mine and discard 1 card from your hand to draw 1 card. Okay, so I can basically use this once because it kneels in order to do the effect. And if I had a card here that I didn't like and I thought I could draw something better, I could use the Gold Mine here. But I don't know what the card on top of my deck right now is, so I have no way of knowing if that is useful or not. And you might, for instance, Tyrell has some card abilities that allow you to see or to look at the top card of your deck. So you might have, if you play Tyrell, you might have often have knowledge of your of the top of your draw deck. But in this case, it would be a complete gamble, and if I was not in a good position, I might take that gamble here, but I am actually quite happy. So I will play this non-unique character, Lannisport Merchant, and this has a marshalling action. Says kneel Lannisport Merchant to reduce the cost of the next Lannister character you marshal this phase by 1. So again, I have 6 gold, but if I use this character, for instance, I could it would be like having 7 gold. For instance, I could play Marshal Sir Jaime Lannister for 6, and then he would cost 5, and I would have 1 more gold remaining for this attachment, and this is something we can try to do. And so Begging Brother has an option to cancel my Lannisport Merchant, but it's quite a valuable card, and as you can see, so Hannes was able to bestow 2 gold on it when he marshaled it, and 1 was spent. Interrupt forces you to discard 1 gold from Begging Brother, and there is 1 left, so 1 thing can be cancelled, and cancelling this reducer character is not worth it. But that does allow me to marshal Sir Jaime Lannister. As you can see, Tywin, whenever a character's strength is different to his printed strength, it will be displayed here. It says S7. That means even though he's strength 6 by default, he has 7 because of his constant ability. And P1 means he has 1 power on him, and the D1 means he has a duplicate. As you can see, duplicate is placed just underneath him so that it's visible. And I have 1 gold left, and I can play this or marshal, I should say marshal, because you marshal cards attachments, locations, and characters, and you play events. That is the proper terminology if you want to be exact. So I can marshal this milk of the poppy, and it's asking me which character I should attach it to. So it's an attachment, I need to attach it to a character. Sometimes attachments can go on other cards, for instance locations, but it will need to say that by default it goes only on characters. And it says treat attached characters printed text box as if it were blank. So if there is a character I don't like, for instance Caitlin, who stops my triggered abilities, I can attach this to Caitlin, and now Caitlin cannot, her text does not apply. Except for traits, it says, which means she still is a lady, and whatever else, the 7 house tally. But this part, while Caitlin is participating part, does not apply any longer. So attachments usually will be one of two types. You can have what we call positive or negative attachments. Negative attachments will usually go on your opponent's character and give them some kind of detrimental effect, in this case blanking the text box, and positive attachments will usually go on your own characters and you can give them something beneficial when you attach a card to them. And this card will stay on Caitlin until Caitlin leaves play, or until the attachment is somehow removed by a card ability. And as you can see, it has the terminal keyword, and also the explanation in brackets says if attached card leaves play, discard this attachment. So attachments that are terminal will go to the discard pile if Caitlin, for instance, now leaves play. But attachments that are not terminal will return back to your hand when attached character leaves play. So that's all I had in this marshalling phase, and now a lot of gold for my opponent to work with.
All right, yeah, and that totally helps me not at all. So I don't have good cards, so I'll marshal a Winterfell Steward, which is the equivalent to the Slammers Merchant or Stark. I'll use an attachment on Caitlin Stark. I use Ice. It gives her +2 strength, and if I win a military challenge with her, I can sacrifice Ice to choose and kill a character. And I will marshal another attachment and put it on Caitlin, which is Blood of the First Man, which gives her another trait, the Old Gods trait, which up until now does absolutely nothing, but that might change in the future. And I can add her now into other challenges where other Stark characters are participating, which is especially helpful if she does not have Milk of the Poppy, but which might also be a way in which I can actually use Ice, because Ice can only be triggered when winning a military challenge, and Caitlin does not have a military icon. But with Blood of the First Man, I will be able to enter her also into challenges in which she does not have the icon, for example, military challenge. And then I have 6 gold left, and I cannot marshal anything anymore. So this is a situation where I have a lot of gold, but I don't have the necessary cards that are helpful in hand, because Miha discarded 2 cards last round and his Intrigue challenges. So gold is important, but so are the right cards. So both important to have gold, but also to have enough draw, to have enough cards, because I cannot make any use of this gold. That's a problem.